Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next City of Echoes chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 47 and 48, the last kind of numbered chapters in the book. Now is just the epilogue left. So we'll jump straight in here. We're obviously in the middle of the action stuff here. This is the start of Sozin's Comet comes in, the counterattack from, Jin and her crew, in addition to the other Earth Kingdom citizens in Ba Sing Se, of course, because this is what the Silver Fangs have been organizing for the last kind of couple of chapters, and the whole, secret message in the pastries. This is what it's been kind of building up towards. So, we highlight that we've cleared out a lot of the surrounding area just to evacuate people from the building so it's safe. But then, yes, the Tundra tanks come in, there are blasts, explosions going in all over the place. The ground is kind of shaking because earthbenders are doing stuff as well. But we highlight immediately that there is immediate success, that because our group has planned so well and they have all these kind of stealth tactics, they're actually pretty good at this kind of guerrilla warfare where just they pop out for a second, do a decent amount of damage, hide again, pop out and do some damage. They take out like a Tundra tank pretty easily like this, like a long shot setting off some explosives with his arrows, that sort of thing. They move on, and then the Earth Kingdom citizens kind of come out and they use the numbers that they have to their advantage to put the Fire Nation under pressure. Now we do sort of highlight that this kind of evolves as the chapter progresses. Initially the Fire Nation are able to kind of push the people back somewhat quickly, but as the comet begins to kind of run out and things begin to wane, suddenly the Earth Kingdom citizens are much more of a factor in what's actually going on here, especially when they start to pick up like weapons from the Fire Nation soldiers and stuff like that. We see Jin and Xuan are kind of working together with their earth bending, and they're able to do some pretty big kind of moves together, like they collapse a building that's pretty much on the verge of collapse, and they bring that down to kind of create a rock slide, and that creates a big distraction, of course. And there's that contrast between the kind of newer kind of characters here in terms of Jin and Xuan kind of doing stuff as earthbenders, and then Longshot and Smellerbee, more veterans in this sort of a situation, just being stealthy, super confident, just getting stuff done, like climbing across the rooftops and stuff like that. You really get across that idea that like Smellerbee is just a menace, just diving at people with her knives, like multiple instances over these two chapters of her just like stabbing someone in the back, stabbing someone in the shoulder. Longshot just hitting people full on with arrows, and we know how incredible he is when he finds a kind of sniper perch, basically. We do highlight that Longshot still has his ankle injury. It's healed to the point where it's not a massive hindrance to him, but he's still dealing with it, of course. So we quickly covered, as in the first half of this chapter, that they get through, they actually pretty much free their own district of most of the Fire Nation kind of coverage, and as they move into the next section, kind of in more towards the middle ring, we see that the other gangs in the territories, the ones not really affiliated with the Silver Fangs, they're also fighting back. So Onsumi and Patron Wu have done their work of kind of organizing things, using their influence to get everyone to counterattack at this point as well. So it's all working together, the organization, the community of the lower ring coming together to actually get some stuff done here, of course. So, yep. As we move on, we get the idea that, Smellerbee and Longshot have kind of war paint on, and she comes over and gives some to Xuan, and then Jin asks for some, so they're all kind of together wearing their own kind of war paint. They do realize that, of course, the comet is making them stronger, but that it's going to be a real morale sapping moment when the comet then fades away, because they're already finding success with the comet active. Imagine how much more that success is going to take root when suddenly the firebenders are not as powerful as they once were. So there is a lot of confidence kind of happening here. But then there's sort of like a counterattack from the Fire Nation. So they bring out the archers, like the Yuyan archers, though I don't think they really call them Yuyan archers. Vashir, I think, is referred to later on. We'll get to that as a Yuyan archer, but we have to assume that that's what they basically mean by this. But yeah, and in this counterattack, they're taken a little bit by surprise. Schwen gets hit in the shoulder and in the leg and topples off one of the buildings. Now, Jin manages to save him. She creates a bunch of kind of like pillars and kind of slabs of earth coming up out of the ground, and this prevents people from immediately grabbing him, but it also allows him to kind of almost like slide down to the ground rather than smash into the ground. But he is kind of stunned on the ground, and because they're in the middle of kind of a war zone, Smellerby is like, Jin, we've got to kind of keep moving. We'll come back for him. He's not like super badly injured, but we can't pick him up right now. And yeah, we just cover the chaos of the battle here as like Jin goes off on her own, and then out of nowhere, like a soldier falls down in front of her, dagger sticking out of his back. Smellerby's just kind of, taking someone out. But no, Schwen is not there when they eventually get to him. Someone's kind of grabbed him. And we find that who has grabbed him, it is the Colonel Monkey and the Rough Rhinos. This is the 47 cliffhanger, is that the Rough Rhinos are the kind of final boss for the characters in this story. These are characters that can be pretty easily dealt with by Team Avatar and other characters like that, but this is the right level of character for our kind of group here. But it's also personally the right character for Smellerby and Longshot, because Colonel Monkey is the character responsible for destroying Jet's village and kind of being one of the leaders in the raid, against various kind of small Earth Kingdom towns like that. So he's kind of pseudo responsible for like other freedom fighters being in the same situation. So this is the right way for Smellerby and Longshot to get their chance at revenge for Jet. It means that they're really intense in this upcoming fight. And then the reason that Jin is like really intense is because he has Schwen captured. So everyone is very, very intense to go at Colonel Monkey when he shows up here with the other Rough Rhinos. And again, we didn't see the Rough Rhinos. They have a bit of a gap in their story where like, they turn up again in the comics, but like, yeah, I guess it does make sense that they would probably turn up here at this moment to be involved in things. He is a colonel after all, so why not? So yeah, we do get reference to a lot of the other characters here. Kachi and the others are referenced. But yeah, Schwen is being held captive. He has a sword up against his neck. And we do get the immediate reaction. She calls up the Longshot. It's the Rough Rhinos. You burned my friend's village. You're a murderer, is what she says to Colonel Monkey here. And there's a little bit of a tonal thing with the Rough Rhinos where sometimes they are borderline almost comedy villains because it's so easy to kind of take advantage of them with high skill characters. But in this case, they are actually presented as being kind of pretty high level combatants, and it speaks more to just how skilled Team Avatar or like an Iroh is to be able to deal with them like he does. Whereas no, they're a major group for Jin and co to deal with, because it is a full lineup of like named characters here who are all skilled in their own individual ways. So that's the whole idea then. And again, we have Vashir here, Yuya and Archer, of course, with the group. So they do present like some of the kind of rivalries to a certain degree going on here. And yeah, it immediately feels like the fight almost doesn't even get going, because the threat against Schwen prevents, any fight from really taking place. So it's mostly just like Longshot kind of away from everyone on the roof, like they kind of have to be kind of wary of. But what actually causes the fight to take off is that they see basically the results of the bigger fight that's ongoing at this point in time, and that is the attack of the Old Masters, the kind of key White Lotus members. Now, I think this paragraph is meant to be describing what Zhang Zhang is doing. They never actually say it's him, and I think the description doesn't really fit what he does in the episode super well. So I'm almost like, is this Iroh? What Iroh is implied to have been doing during the time? That would maybe fit a little bit better for Jin, that she gets to quote-unquote see Mushi from distance and realize maybe the significance of him. It says, we turn only to see a giant pillar of fire swirling through the sky like one of the dust storms from the desert, except it's inside the walls, inside of the city. There's a figure that flies inside of the pillar like they're in the midst of a storm. And it's like, that's Zhang Zhang is the character who maybe comes the closest to this because he's flying in the air, but he's sending walls of fire. You can say they're pillars of fire, but he's not inside the pillar. He's just moving them forward up the path, and as far as I'm aware, he's never seen, quote unquote, inside the pillar, and that the pillars aren't really, quote unquote, swirling necessarily, because Zhang Zhang is more of a creating walls of fire person. So is this almost implying that maybe off screen Iroh does some crazy, pillar of fire kind of thing or something like that? I'm not really sure. Like, is it just a poor description of what Zhang Zhang does, or is it trying to describe something else? I'm not really sure. But yeah, this distraction is enough that Longshot fires a shot next to the person kind of holding Jin down. She's then able to kind of get out, do some earthbending, free herself. Smellerbee jumps into action, kicking that guy in the face. Xuan then kind of gains access to some earth, and he's able to kind of get back into the fight as well, because, okay, he's been hitting the shoulder and the leg, but he's not, like, taken out of the fight overall. And yeah, Kachi gets stabbed in the shoulder, and Jin has to be the one to sort of stop this before Smellerbee theoretically just beats him into a pulp. I raise the earth at his hands, locking him to the ground instead. I'm not sure she'll stop until he is a bloody ruin. So she's trying to prevent her from going a bit maybe overboard in some of these situations. While this is happening, long shots under heavy fire. Colonel Monkey is firing, comet-assisted blasts at him up on the roof. The reason for this is that as he turns around, it's revealed that he has 3 arrows sticking out of his back. So Longshot has got the Colonel 3 times, which is pretty crazy, just to highlight that, the characters with all these kind of bladed, kind of piercing weapons are actually like doing stuff here. It's pretty interesting. Longshot has to get down from the roof to kind of dodge the fire, so he's finally on the ground. This is where he nearly gets hit by some arrows as he hits the ground. But this is where the Rough Rhinos decide to actually make their retreat, because the comet is basically on the verge of kind of fading at this point in time. They're beginning to take some injuries, the Rough Rhinos, so they make the decision to just get out of there. So yeah, they grab Colonel Monkey and kind of head out. And then they spot some of the other aspects of the fight happening. The impossible sight of Tundra tanks flying in the air, someone thrusting them in the air like toys, falling one after another in a neat stack. So that's Bumi, of course, and what he does throughout the battle, just sending these things flying like they're nothing. Again, given that 2 of our main characters here are earthbenders, really highlighting that gulf in sort of power between one of the most elite earthbenders in the entire series versus kind of 2 characters with potential, kind of up and coming, training their skills, but like they don't have that sort of power level to just casually launch tanks into the air like Bumi can. Even together, they have to kind of do everything to pull down a building that's almost on the verge of collapse, but Bumi's just like boom, boom, boom. The way he freed Omashu, of course, it speaks to that kind of difference between the top tier benders and some of our other characters. And I do appreciate that with this book, is that they make sure to keep, I think, the level of Jin as a bender and the level of Xuan as a bender in the right kind of area and not overdo it given where they're at. And I do like that. At this point, with the Rough Rhinos kind of chased off, the idea is that a lot of the elite combatants on the Fire Nation side of things are being either defeated by the White Lotus or other groups elsewhere in the city. They advance into like the middle ring at this point. This is where they can see quite clearly that the comet, its brilliance is slightly diminished, so the power is beginning to wane. And this is where they kind of describe Jin as having her big moment where she feels like the best she's ever felt as an earthbender here, kind of running with the people. She's capable of defending people if they get into trouble. She's hurling boulders at people, and it's just this moment where she's finally confident about her skills. As the earth answers my call, I throw a boulder towards another cluster of soldiers with a yell, and it lands before them with a satisfying thud. For the first time in my life, I feel like an earthbender. And the idea there is that she also feels like her mother in a way for the first time as well. So that's a kind of cool one to note, just in terms of like, okay, she's really taking a liking to her earthbending skills, and I'm assuming she's going to continue to, embrace them as she goes forward. And then this is pretty much the end of the fight. The idea is that at this point, what ends up happening is the White Lotus take the advantage. The city and the amount of people forming in on the gradually lowering power and amount of Fire Nation soldiers just is too much. The battle for the city ends not long after. The palace is taken back by liberating forces even before the comet has cleared the sky. And our heroes are able to make their way back to Susu and the bakery. And it's just a happy reunion that everyone has managed to get out of this with only minor injuries, where like Schwen, of course, took 2 arrows, but thankfully nowhere kind of super serious. He will recover. Longshot and Smellerbee kind of limp into the yard after their kind of vicious kind of battle with the rough rhinos here, because of how intense they were to try and defeat them, and they get their win. Now there's a slight kind of weirdness to it, of course, because the rough rhinos can't be kind of killed off, not to mention the idea of, I'm not sure you necessarily want to go down the path of having them kill any of the rough rhinos, but I think it is significant that in the middle of the big battle for like the fate of the world, they do get their confrontation with Colonel Monkey, and they come out on top of that kind of battle, where she gets to stab a few people, Longshot hits the Colonel Monkey with a few arrows, and a bunch of other stuff kind of happens as well. They win the day. They scare them off at the moment where they should have been at their most powerful, but Longshot and Smellerbee come out on top, so they get their big wins ultimately. They do Schwen checks on Longshot's ankle, which he's still struggling with, but he's going to recover in time. Smellerbee then picks up a piece of fabric, a torn piece of the Fire Nation flag, ties it around her forehead, whooping in victory. And it's a big celebration here back at the Wen Bakery, where there's all the kind of Judy girls, including like Sai and everyone. Baby Ming is involved, Grandmother Wen. It's just very, very happy, exciting times. I watch their swaying, happy movements until my stomach aches from laughing. A good kind of hurt. And that's where the kind of battle section of the book comes to an end. It is quite like boom, 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 really quick. Like in 2 chapters, it starts and it ends. This book definitely, I would say the action stuff is not meant to be like the focus of everything. It's more about the character stuff. But interestingly, we know from the 8-page kind of extra thing as part of the Barnes & Noble edition of the book, they do include this as sort of the quote-unquote almost deleted scene, what the original version of the action chapter was. And it was pretty much like the core of the action took place in about like 1.5 pages, and Avatar Studios asked for it to be extended out like quite heavily because it's such a significant part of the book. So it's crazy to almost imagine that there could have been a version of this action scene that was like maybe 2 pages and done. But it was definitely needed, and this is where it works, because the time spent on this works to get across the impact, the emotion of having Longshot and Smellerbee fight the rough rhinos, in addition to Jin having her moments where she feels like an earthbender. The kind of more kind of almost devastating part of the fight where Schwen gets hit with the arrows, the kind of counter attack, and then they come back and actually manage to kind of make it work out. The White Lotus in the distance kind of almost distracting to create the opening. Seeing the kind of intercut moments of highlighting what the other citizens are doing, and as they gradually make their number advantage kind of known, and what we set up from the previous chapters with the whole pastry thing, spreading word around about Rise Up when the comet comes. It actually works, and the Fire Nation don't really have a counter to that at the end of the day. And it helps to just give some nice context to the scene, that like it wasn't just Iroh, Bumi, Palku and all those kind of characters. They just liberated Ba Sing Se. It was like, no, they were important, very important in liberating Ba Sing Se in terms of drawing, I suppose, a large part of the Fire Nation forces and dealing with it. But you have to give so much credit to the people of the city coming together, as exemplified by Jin, Schwen, Longshot and Smellerbee and what they do in these chapters. So I actually think it's a quite successful two chapters of action, even if it's not like a huge, like the focus of this book is really on that sort of thing. If I had some slight criticism, it's maybe just that I think this as the final chapter where the book sort of ends prior to the epilogue, I'm not sure I agree with this as the right spot to end the book, kind of except for the epilogue. I really do think they should have just continued on, like chapter 49, 50, maybe even 51. Maybe 51 is the epilogue. And then the epilogue is actually a little bit of a step on from that. Like it's a month into the future, 2 months into the future, just to highlight where we're going. I think it plays it a little bit too safe right at the end, where it does feel a little bit like, let's wrap this thing up, we're going home. And I wanted a little bit more time after the action to just experience the characters outside of the craziness that's going on and highlight what they're doing now into the future. We'll talk about this more when we actually talk about the epilogue, but I will also mention it a little bit here, that I think there is the kind of two endings of the book, the way the epilogue ends, but also the way the kind of main present day story ends. And they do sort of just do battle ends, kind of fun times back at the bakery, that's it. And we kind of just repeat the same thing with the epilogue ending, which I think is a little bit unfortunate. And it feels like if there's a section of the book where it feels like there's some stuff missing, it's in or around here where I think I would have wanted a little bit more page count. But otherwise, I think, the book's been really, really strong, kind of start to finish. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on chapter 47 and 48, the big action set piece of the book. What are your thoughts on Colonel Monkey showing up and, Smellerbee and Longshot getting their quote-unquote revenge? But just thoughts on the action, thoughts on the liberation of Ba Sing Se from a different perspective. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you feel about this. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.